It might be a computer terrorist. It might be a hacker. It might be a script kiddie. It might be a disgruntled employee. It might be just someone having some fun. These are all potential individuals that are looking to attack your network. This live lesson is on the critically important topic of network security. We are going to look at some of the most common ways in which you might be attacked, and of course, we're going to discuss ways in which to guard against those attacks. I would suggest that anyone involved with networking watch this particular live lesson. Even if security just isn't your bag, if this is not your particular area of expertise, you are still going to be interested in this particular video because it is going to present that high-level overview that you need to understand this absolutely imperative function in the network. Network security is so important, and it gets more important every single hour. For that matter, with the internet today, every single minute. So enjoy this live lesson on common network attacks and their mitigations. Folks, I've got some bad news for you. We are under attack. That's right. Our networks are under attack not only from external individuals or external corporations or external groups or external states, but our networks are also under attack typically from internal forces. Disgruntled employees or employees that are really happy stealing your corporate resources. So more so than ever today, we want to really focus on network attacks. We want to make sure we understand the most common network attacks that could happen, and we want to discuss ways in which those attacks can be mitigated or prevented entirely. So one of the attack forms that we need to be aware of, and this was just made painfully obvious to everyone in a Wall Street Journal extra report, is social engineering. It said something like this, the headline: "What's the biggest problem with security on the network? You." And it had the U, Y-O-U exclamation point in a huge font. You see, human nature makes us very vulnerable to this. We want to help people. So when someone figures out that your IT department has a manager named Dave, they'll pretend they are Dave. And they'll call you at your desk and say, "Hi, this is Dave down in IT. Do you know me?" And you'll go, "Oh, yeah, I've heard of Dave in IT. How you doing?" They'll say, "Great. Look, I just need your username and password real quick so that I can fix some things on your computer before you get fired." And you go, "Oh, okay, yeah. Here's my username and password. Go ahead and fix that stuff." And of course, they use your username and password in order to wreak havoc on the network infrastructure. So we have to watch out for these social engineering attacks that prey on human nature and use the human vulnerability factor as the way to attack. By the way, you might think, well, Anthony, how the heck do I mitigate this? The number one way you mitigate these social engineering attacks is through, education. That's right. You are going to educate people that these attacks even exist, and you take care of it. That's how you do it. Education. It is hugely important. Now, before we get into other attack forms, I did want to pause for a moment here and just give you a look at a non-social engineering type of an attack and see how that would occur. Now that we've talked about that human vulnerability factor, what would a typical attack look like against your network? Well, this is what one would look like. Initially, the attacker performs reconnaissance. Big fancy word for they map out your network. They know your network maybe even better than some of your engineers. They figure out every operating system, every application you're running, where those things are running, what are the addresses on those machines. They document your network better perhaps than your own documentation. Then they manipulate users, maybe even through social engineering. They figure out a way to escalate their privileges. Once they do that, they tend to gather additional information, install backdoors potentially so they can get in anytime they want, And then finally, after this process is run, they go ahead and leverage systems. What are they leveraging the systems for? Well, maybe to embarrass you, maybe to steal information from you, maybe to attack another system. This happens a lot. We literally have computers that can be used as what we call zombies. So they come in, take over your systems, and then your systems launch an attack on other systems. Yikes. Not good. So here's a look at the process and the thought process that could go behind a particular common attack. In addition to social engineering, what other types of attacks are very common that we need to be ready for? Well, a famous one that's been going on for decades is IP spoofing. What's scary about IP spoofing, and by the way, it means someone is pretending to be an IP address that they are not. So they're pretending to be an IP address that isn't their own. What's scary about this is it's typically the first step in some other more damaging attack. I mean, if someone wants to pretend they're 10.10.10.1 when they're really 172.16.11, and that's all they do, we could care less. But when they do this to gain access to something they shouldn't have access to or to stage a bigger attack, IP spoofing is a real problem. How do we guard against IP spoofing? Well, I'll tell you folks, our modern firewalls are trained and they're running special algorithms and special processes that guard against this IP spoofing. So firewalls are a big way to go. Spoofing attacks might help lead to a man-in-the-middle attack. You have this network where your data is being transferred and the network is vulnerable. The attacker is able to grab the packets as they are being transmitted over that network and maybe even send them on their way. Yeah, a packet sniffer is a way to do this. So we are just grabbing a copy of the packets. So the two people that are communicating have no idea anything's wrong, and this man in the middle is performing this eavesdropping. They're wanting to read your data. Maybe they're even attacking the integrity of your data. So they're getting it, messing with it, and sending it on its way. All of this is bad. We want to keep that man out of the middle. How do we do that? We do it with security technologies like IPsec, IP security. IP security is amazing. It's a suite of protocols that allows your particular systems to authenticate each other to make sure they are who they say they are, encrypt the information so if someone grabs it in the middle, they can't read it, and also to protect the integrity of the information so if someone grabs it, messes with it, and sends it on its way, we can detect that. I love it. I love it. It's actually called the security triad. It's so important. Confidentiality or encryption, authentication, and integrity protection. These three things are fundamental to computer security these days. Ping sweeps, port scans, and packet sniffers. Oh my, this sounds bad. These are the ways in which they will engage in that reconnaissance attack against you. So using these particular tools, they'll map out your network and document it. Obviously, this is not good because of the attack that's probably going to come after it. Once again, firewalls are a great way to guard against this stuff. They'll detect that one of these ping sweeps to find all your IPs or port scans is going on to see what applications you're running, and they will shut down these attempts. Let me make this clear. We have to play a balancing act in security against convenience for us and security. You see, as an administrator, we may want to be able to do a port scan or a ping sweep against our own network, but in order to enable that, we can allow some devastating attacks in. So we're constantly playing this balancing act of convenience for us versus security. How about phishing, farming, and identity theft? Notice the spellings here. PH for phishing and PH for farming. Phishing is a social engineering attack where what appears to be a legitimate email or what appears to be a legitimate website is illegitimate, and someone will enter their information into this illegitimate website. Trust me, banks aren't going to send you emails these days typically saying click the link below to get into our site. I mean, more and more phishing is becoming such a problem that financial institutions won't even email you something like that. I just got one today. It was supposedly from a large shipping organization, and it said that my package didn't make it. And it had all this official jargon in it, and they wanted me to click on a link and enter some personal information so they could steal my identity. Nice try. Again, education is the way we foil this particular phishing attack. I know that the shipping agency would never send me an email like that to begin with, that they lost my package. It's not going to happen. They're going to phone me if they lost my package. So, interesting stuff. Farming. Farming is something that antivirus software can't help with, and even the education of users can't help with. This is pretty scary. Farming is where they mess with the DNS, typically, the domain name service that we studied in earlier videos, and they redirect traffic to some other site. Whoa. So that one is pretty interesting. You're redirected to another site, and that one's going to be much tougher than some of the other approaches. Another interesting phishing attack that's happening now has to do with browsers. And the users, we love, don't we, to use tabs in our browsers. So, I've got my company's website up here, and then I've got Twitter, and then I've got Facebook, and then I can open another one to Google. So we love to use these tabs. Well, what'll happen is, in this new style of phishing attack, is they'll figure out how to inject a tab into your browser that says, like, Bank of America, and then you'll click on it and think, oh yeah, that's my B of A tab that I opened. Isn't that scary? So they're creating tabs. You'll think for sure it's legitimate, and you'll go to that particular tab and you'll fall prey to this new style of phishing attack. Well, I bet you won't fall prey to it now because you've had this course. Password attacks? Well, there's two common types here. If you have weak passwords, they'll use a dictionary brute force style attack, and they'll just guess at your password until they come up with it. Computers can do this really fast, and weak passwords can be cracked in seconds. Or they'll install a keylogger piece of software where they're literally recording your password as you type it in. To do a keylogger, they've got to initially get into your system and escalate their privileges to install that. That's a little tough. If we take care of our security perimeter, that'll be tough for them. The dictionary attack that I described, the brute force attack, folks, one way that you want to combat against that attack right off the bat is you want to train your users to use really strong passwords. And really strong passwords aren't that hard to teach them to do. I love volleyball, for instance. So my password can be capital V 0 1 1 3 Y capital B ampersand. I drew that a little weird. There we go. And 1 1. There's actually a name for doing this. I forget what it's called, but this is a really great way to go. This will take one of those brute force attacks and just send it in a tailspin. Where it might take seconds to get a common word, that word that we use with the uppercase, lowercase, the numbers and letters, it could take weeks. And hopefully we'll detect that that software is running before it ever has a chance to be successful. The most scary attacks these days are availability attacks. Attacks against the availability of your website or a particular service that you're running. These are called denial of service attacks. The scariest of which is the distributed denial of service attack. Why is it so scary? Well, because a distributed denial of service attack can take down the entire internet or portions thereof. A famous one? Let's type it in here to Google. SQL Slammer. SQL Slammer was a famous distributed denial of service attack. And here we can see that on 5:30 Universal Coordinated Time on January 25th, 2003, this distributed denial of service attack was launched. and it infected 75,000 systems within the first 10 minutes. Portions of the internet in Asia Pacific were literally off the grid as a result of this distributed denial of service attack. It cost millions and millions and millions of dollars, this attack. And these are the most feared attacks. A denial of service attack could literally be as simple as you just killing your company's WAN link by intentionally downloading a bunch of huge video files. You see how scary they are? They're so easy to carry out. It's you just bombarding a system so that the system isn't available. Our firewalls today are designed to guard against these types of attacks, and so are our intrusion prevention systems. They're kind of the cousins to firewalls. Intrusion prevention systems are designed to see the triggers of this attack and stop these attacks in their tracks. I wanted to go ahead and end this video with some common best practices that I really want you to keep in mind. Make sure you're patching your software. Make sure you're shutting off unnecessary services in your environment. If you don't need a web server on your router, shut it off. Use those strong passwords like we talked about. Make sure your equipment is physically protected. Don't allow spurious or unexpected inputs into your applications. If someone's trying to put garbage in, make sure it shuts it down. Back up your data. Educate your employees. Encrypt your information as much as possible. Make the investment in firewalls and intrusion prevention systems. And here's a big one, folks. Speak to the CEO and get that CEO together with the CTO, Chief Technology Officer, and plan a written security policy. How do you want to secure your world? How you're going to do it? Exactly how you're going to do it. So your overall approach, then your detailed approach to how you're going to secure it. What are people allowed to do, not allowed to do? How will people be punished if they break the rules? All of this needs to be documented, and this document needs to be disseminated and people educated on it. And a security policy is a huge, huge, great starting point. So, lots of best practices there for you to wrap up this very important live lesson on common attacks against our networks and some ways in which we can guard against them.